Hey everyone, happy Friday afternoon. We are so excited to be back with Life on Purpose Live. It is February, and you know what February means? It is Valentine's. And we have Pastor Tony Scott. He has got a book that is 1 + 1 = 1. We're going to talk about intimacy in marriage. He and his wife were married, I think he said 55 years. She passed away last year. But he's counseled over 10,000 couples. He understands what people face in marriage. And we are going to talk to him today about how we can create that 1 + 1 = 1 relationship in our home. So welcome. I'm so glad to have you.
Hey, Beth, thank you so much for having me. It's quite an honor and a privilege to be here and to talk about a subject that's very dear to my heart.
And it's so dear to mine, and it's so dear, you see marriage is taking a beating in the culture today because, people talk about, do you really need to be married? Do you, is it just a piece of paper? And, we talked about this a little before. My husband and I have been married 29 years. We had to work very hard to get to this place. I mean, we had to overcome some hurdles, and thank God for God. So what do you say about that covenant, that sacred act of marriage before God?
Well, for me, of course, marriage has a Christian foundation. God himself established, created marriage. Therefore, he wrote the manual on it in Genesis chapter 3, the marriage between Adam and Eve. And what an incredible statement by God there of bringing two people together, two people who were very much not alike in appearance, plumbed differently. So for the purposes of creation, procreation, and then established a relationship with them, which in fact was a part of the Godhead. Before there was an earth, before there was a universe, there was the law of oneness in the Godhead. God, he said, God speaking for himself, I am one God. There is one God eternally existing, of course, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And so when God created us and when he brought, and I think this is so interesting in the Hebrew, Beth, it literally says God created Adam from the dust or the dirt of the ground, but he built Eve. And the word there for built is a work of art. He built a work of art. He built her. And then what did he do? He brought her to Adam and presented her. And he was overcome with joy and love and emotion and connected to her. And everything God did from the very Godhead itself, covenant between he, the Son, the Holy Spirit, covenant between man and wife, all through the Bible, you see covenant. Right there in the Garden of Eden, the Adamic covenant, the Edenic covenant, and then all the way through the covenant with Noah, the covenant with Abraham, the covenant never to again destroy the world by water, the covenant in the New Testament, the last covenant, Jesus Christ, the blood covenant of Jesus Christ. So everything about God and relationship is covenant. Covenant's very different than a contract or an agreement.
So let me ask you, you've counseled over 10,000 couples. And, I come into marriage with what my life experience was, and I come from a big old mess. And so I'm sure I brought into my big old mess, and my husband came with this big old mess, and, broken people come from broken homes. And so when you bring people into a marriage situation, we got the white picket fence idea. We just want to.
Yes.
So what is the process of preparing ourselves? Maybe not for marriage. I mean, if you're about to get married, yes, but working yourself to where you get to be fully you and whole so that you can have a healthy marriage. I mean, what are the pitfalls people have that keep them from, being all they can be?
Well, I go right back to the Bible, and I think it all begins with covenant, and it all begins with a oneness with that person. And if you just look carefully at the scriptures, the most empowering, overwhelming desire that God had relative to us was an intimate, personal relationship. That's what he said to Moses. That's what he said to Adam and Eve in the garden. And when you come into the New Testament, you can see Jesus himself in John 17, saying to the Father, praying to the Father, I want them to be one like you and I are one. So the law of oneness is there. so that you pour yourself into each other.
Mhm.
If I could pour myself into my wife and add value to her life, I had a right to be in her life. And when she poured value into my life and poured herself into my life, she added value to my life. And so I was forever doing that. She was forever doing that. Now, that doesn't mean we didn't have challenges. We did have challenges. We're in ministry, for heaven's sakes. And there are a lot of pressures. There are a lot of challenges in ministry.
Yeah.
But during those times, when we went through the roughest places, she was my biggest support. I actually called her my anchor, because she would keep me anchored sometimes. I mean, there were times when I wanted to wash my hands of it and walk away and go evangelize or something. This pastoring gets difficult sometimes. But she would be there to anchor me. And we would walk through these times as one. And she would help me to see things I could not see. I would help her to see things she could not see.
Yeah.
And together we became a team. And Beth, we worked side by side in the ministry for 46 years.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about 7 days a week. And I'm talking about every day at the office that I was there and she was there. Her office was right across the hall from mine. We did ministry together. And I've had ministers say to me, I don't think I could work every day with my wife like that. Well, it was a joy for me. I wouldn't have wanted to be there without her. She was a protection for me. She was a covering for me as I was for her.
Well, and oneness with her starts with,
Yeah, I think I've lost your voice here.
uh-oh, are you
Not hearing your voice.
Let's see. Still no? Nope.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, let's see. I'll do this.
I don't know what to do here. Can't hear. My guy's coming back in. I can't hear her. Okay. No, still can't hear anything. No.
I could turn it on here, but it's going to be really hard to hear.
Beth, can you hear me? Can you shake your head if you can hear me? I just can't hear you.
Okay, there we go.
There we go.
I accidentally hit mute. That's the last place I checked. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, it's no problem. Turn it down just a little bit for me, Ed. Thank you.
Okay, so we were talking about oneness with God. So because that is where you start with intimacy
Yes.
with God. So we live in a world where people are feeling more isolated. I mean, we're coming out of COVID.
Yes.
You know, we've got all the craziness in the world, and
Yes.
you have a high number of people feeling alone and
Yes.
isolated. And how do you begin to counsel people to seek that answer instead of from other people, or people are looking to fill that God hole with many things? How do we seek God? Because ultimately that's the answer to all of our relationships, is a relationship with God. So how do we take that loneliness and fill it with God from a simple standpoint?
Okay, so there are three things. And the first thing is that in a true covenant marriage relationship, you have what I call the supernatural power of self-recovery.
Yeah.
If you just look at the body is a unit. It's a unity. All of our systems function together, one with the other, and they are all integrated. So the body is one. And we come together as spirit, soul, and body. And the body has this supernatural power given by God to heal itself. I personally believe when you have a covenant relationship, you have that same thing in a marriage. Secondly, there is a spiritual elasticity where the band can stretch, but it does not break. So we have tension, we have difficult times, we have challenges. And what I try to say to people, thirdly, is do not become selfish in the marriage relationship. If you want to kill a marriage, then become selfish. What I need, what I want. Shirley and I even took this into our love relationship, the intimate side of the marriage relationship. And I had to have her teach me how she wanted to be loved.
Yeah.
And I had to teach her how I wanted to be loved. It was totally different.
Yeah.
If I had loved her like I wanted to be loved, it wouldn't have worked for her. If she had loved me like she wanted to be loved, it wouldn't have worked for her. So we worked together. That spiritual elasticity helped us so many times. That supernatural power to recover from a fight, a challenge in the marriage, a big disagreement. And we would come back together. We would see that it's the enemy trying to divide and separate us. And I never, in all of our marriage, I try to remember, do not attack her. Attack that one who is causing the challenge here, the enemy of your marriage. Don't attack. So I never called her a name.
Yeah.
As in the 58 years we dated, 3 years and 55 years, I never called her a name.
Yeah.
We never used the D word, not even one time.
Yeah.
Did we ever have that kind of a discussion or think that we could not make it? And so those are the things that I believe you have to take off the table.
Yeah.
You have to be committed. Years ago, there was a survey done. A group of individuals, professionals across this country came together, counselors, marriage experts, what we call experts. And they were assigned the subject of what does it take to make a marriage work? And Beth, when they issued their paper, the one thing they said above everything else is if a man decides that he's going to love his wife, period, and a woman decides she's going to love her husband, period, not a comma, not a semicolon, not a colon, period, then a marriage can work.
That's incredible because it's a predetermining, that's what I like to call on purpose. But I want to go back to what you said about teaching each other to love each other.
Yes.
That requires a great amount of vulnerability in communication. I mean, you have to let your total guard down.
Yes.
And let that person into those sacred spaces, sometimes that no one has ever been. And most people don't communicate to that depth of level, but that is what we need. So how do you begin to communicate more effectively that paves the way so that those intimate conversations can take place to be over the covenant of the marriage?
In the book, I talk about soul nakedness. This is something that Shirley and I practiced and we talked about. I would say to her, I have to know the depth of your feelings about any situation. We have to go deeper than surface stuff. I would say in those multiplied thousands of marriages that Shirley and I had the opportunity to pour into, more times than not, the vast majority of times, there was a very shallow relationship.
Yeah.
People get married and they expect so much of marriage. But you see, every marriage is a creation. Just like God created the first marriage, you come together with your spouse, you create a marriage. And actually, the marriage becomes what you pour into it. So let's just go to the garden for a moment. God brought Eve to Adam and presented her to him. Where did she come from? I love that word in the Hebrew. God built her for the man. She was built. She's like a piece of art, a work of art. She was built for the man. But where did she come from? She came from him. He took a piece of the man and he formed this beautiful sculptor, this beautiful work of art, this woman, and presented her. And in doing that, he was literally saying to Adam, she will become what you pour into her. So let's go back to the priesthood for a moment. The priest would go into the Holy of Holies. He would hear from God. God would come and sit on the mercy seat between the cherubims and commune with the priest. And he would pour himself into the priest. And what would the priest do? He would come out and pour himself into the people. It's the same thing. A man has to go into the presence of God. He has to hear the voice of God. He's got to come out of that and have a deep personal relationship with his wife. There's a portion of each of us that you and I, all of us, will take to our grave. There's this little portion of secrets inside of us that no one will ever hear and no one will ever know. And that's okay. I'm not objecting to that because I know that's the truth. I know it's true with me. But all else, I've got to open myself. I've got to reveal. I've got to tell her when I'm hurting. I got to tell her when I don't know how I'm going to make it through this trial, this difficulty. You know, in pastoral work, you have challenges sometimes. I've been through a church
A
split.
bunch of them.
Yes, and it's hell. It's just pure hell. And you're watching really good people be totally misled by something or someone, and you're trying to figure out how in the world can this happen? I'm praying, I'm fasting, I'm seeking God. I don't get this. We lost 7 elders at one time. They resigned and they went across town to another church. Took half of our music team with them. I thought I'd die. Beth, I kid you not. It's the worst time of my life. Finally, after several months, after about a year, my wife said to me, "You look like death warmed over." I had lost weight, partly because I just didn't have an appetite, partly because I was fasting a lot. And she said, "You must wake up and do something about this." And Beth had an encounter with God I'll never forget because she told me, "Your answer is going to come from God." I got on my face before God. And after 18 months of suffering, the grief of that loss, I said to God, "I can't live like this. You have to heal me." I mouthed the words right on my floor in my office. God, you must heal me. And God said nothing. I got real quiet. And suddenly in my spirit, I heard these words, "I cannot heal you." I was shocked. I said, "What do you mean you can't heal me? You can heal. You are God. You could heal me of this grief today." He said, "I cannot." And so I asked the word that we always ask, why? And this is what he said, "Because you've chosen to grieve. And when you choose not to grieve, I'll heal you." I got up off my floor, went into my little bathroom with a sink and washed my face in cold water and dried my face off, came back and sat down at my desk. And I said, "I'll never grieve that loss again the rest of my days on this earth." And I did not. But she was there walking with me through all of that. She hurt just like I did. It was painful for her. It was humiliating for us. But you know what? We were so much one. I felt her strength. She felt my strength. And we walked side by side into those times, those difficulties, knowing that our covenant marriage was so strong, it could actually handle any assault of hell that came against it.
So from that, you shifted your perspective. I mean, you had to go from grief.
Yes.
Okay, it's time to be done with my grief.
Yes,
God
I did.
said the season is over. So you had to choose to speak differently, walk differently, think differently. And so that's powerful because, you know, you heard from God and then you obeyed God. And then you walked out what he said.
Well, if you look in the Bible, one of the reasons we became one is we grasp what that word meant. The two shall become one flesh in Genesis chapter 3. And then, of course, it's repeated in the Gospels. But people put a sexual connotation on that, and rightly so, because it does mean that. Right. But the oneness there is of spirit, soul, and body. And almost 1,900 times the word one is used in the Bible.
Wow.
Just think about that. Almost 1,900 times, one of the most used words in the Bible. So what is this message, this law of oneness that God's trying to get across to us in our marriages, in our families, sports teams, business, ministry? There is no place where you're dealing with people that the law of oneness does not work.
Mhm.
When we were writing this book, a young lady in my church, Lauren Clark, she's a school teacher, and she had taken some time off to raise her children, and she helped me with this. Shirley had written her portion of it and left it when she went to be with Jesus, and I sat down and wrote my part, and we wanted to put it together so that it would really flow. And I said to God, what shall we name this? I don't have a title. She'd wanted to write this book for 10 years. And she was determined that it was going to be written. And those last 2 years of her life were really challenging.
Mm.
And she just kept writing and putting her thoughts down. And one day in my spirit, I heard the Lord say to me, 1 + 1 = 1. That's who you and Shirley were. That's who you are. And, I will always be one with her. I know she's not here, but I'm always going to be one with her.
Yeah.
I feel her presence very often. I sit and think about her. She'll
Mhm.
never die in my heart. I told her that. She will never be forgotten. She'll be alive, because that's what oneness does for you.
Well, and you said you don't compete with each other. You complete each other.
We complete each other.
One of the things that I set, because I told you I come from a mess. So when I got married, I made a goal. I said, I just want my husband to be happy to come home every day. And I want my kids to be happy once, we have
Yes.
kids. That shaped so much of our marriage, because that was a simple decision, but there's a lot of thought that goes into those completions, because, he's coming home, he's busy, he's stressed out. But those preset mind convictions, determinations, on purpose things, how important are those to complete the spouse as opposed to compete with the spouse?
You're never going to complete your spouse if you do not know internally your spouse. You've got to have a deep knowledge, a deep intimacy of your spouse. So what I have married couples do when they come to me for counseling, and even when I teach the classes, I have each of the spouses write out a list and prioritize the list off of this question. What does my husband need from me? What does my wife need from me? And I have them write them out without looking at them. And I tell them, don't let the other person see them. Bring them back to our next session. If it's a class, I'll say bring them back to the next class. If I'm counseling with them, bring them back to the next counseling session. In all of these years, thousands of couples, I've never had one couple get that list right.
I was just going to say, I bet that had to be interesting.
No, you would be shocked. Sometimes they didn't get any of it right.
Yeah.
Maybe they got the right things on there, but not in the right priority. I've had wives look at her, because I have them swap lists when they come into the next session.
Wow.
And I've had a wife look at it and say, that's not number one for sure. And I would say, well, what is number one? Well, she'd say number 3. And I'd say, okay, here's what I want you to do. Correct the list and give it back to him. Correct your list and give it back to her. And now you have a Bible on how your wife's needs can be met, your husband's needs can be met. They've just given it to you.
That's incredible. I mean, that's so simple, but yet it's so profound.
Yes, it is.
You then have, there's my list. So
there it is.
So we have a lot of people that, are in marriages and they think there's no hope. They're unhappy. They feel like, oh gosh, we'll never communicate like that. What do you say to them? There's always hope and there's always a way back, right?
Yes. The first thing that I say to a couple, I don't counsel with couples who are not willing to attend church. They don't have to come to our church, but they must attend church on a regular basis. And everywhere I've been in the world, I've taught this very same principle. You must go to church. You must hear the word of the Lord, because you will never be one in a marriage the way God intended until you become one with him. You must seek the intimacy of God. You must come to the Father through Jesus Christ and develop an intimacy with God. Out of the intimacy with God and being able to pour out everything to God, you will now come back to your spouse and be able to do the same thing with them. And you will not only receive the favor of God when you do that, you will not only feel the presence of God, but when you come and do that with your spouse, you are taking that marriage to a deeper level. You're anchoring that marriage and you're becoming one with each other. And suddenly what you want for your spouse is whatever is the best for them. We didn't always agree. I came home one day and she said to me, I'm sick of this carpet. This carpet's been in here for 5, 6, 7 years, whatever. I'm sick of having carpet. I don't want any more carpet. I want hardwood floors. And I said, yeah, okay. So what's that going to cost? First question out of every man's mind when his wife, what's that going to cost? And she told me, and I was shocked. I said, that's crazy. You could replace the carpet twice over for that. Oh, no, I'm not having any more carpet. She said, what if I told you that I have the money to do it? I said, then you can go do it. So one day I came home and this hardwood floor sitting in the middle of the floor, just stacked up. And she got it done. And it wasn't a really major disagreement. I said, I don't like that expenditure. It's a lot of money. Right. She said, well, if I'm going to live here, and we were going to live there, I want what I want. Actually, Beth, I didn't deny her anything. And if she were sitting right here beside me today, she would tell you when she really wanted something, she won the argument. I wanted her to be happy. I wanted her to be the best she could be. I wanted her to have the best clothes. I wanted her to look beautiful because she was beautiful. And I didn't care. And if I had to work, and sometimes in our early life, I worked 3 jobs. I paid my way all the way through Bible college without having a loan or a grant to help me. And I worked 3 jobs doing it. And she would raise the kids. I mean, I used to go to school all day and work till 11 o'clock at night. Yeah. And she would raise those kids. But for her and I, it was together we were doing that. We were together, and I had her solid support all the time.
And I think that's so important. And I want to touch on that when you invite Christ in and you surrender your marriage to God, the supernatural favor that then enters into those weak spots. I mean, God can do a very quick work, and it's not what we think. Oh gosh, it may take a lot of counseling, but it may take supernatural. The more we surrender to God, the more he enters in. And so he does something so uniquely supernatural that we can't understand it in a marriage that puts itself before God, right?
Yes. Well, let me give you 4 things that are in the book. I won't try to develop them here, but just mention them. First of all, marriage is a process, and it's a process that never ends from the day that you stand in front of a minister, justice of the peace, or whoever, and he pronounces your husband and wife. In the movies, they walk off together hand in hand, and it says the end. That's the beginning, actually. This is the beginning of the marriage. You got to create it. She came from a marriage. He came from a marriage. Sometimes 2 or 3 marriages they came through because of divorce. Now they're coming together. She's got thoughts and feelings and opinions from that marriage. So does he. But now you've got to come together and create a new marriage. And so first thing I tell them is this is a process. And I like to think of marriage as a muscle, the marriage muscle. How strong is your marriage muscle? What are you doing daily to exercise that muscle? Because it's a process. Second thing is it's costly. It's very costly. Selfishness is not allowed. I cannot just always be thinking about what I want out of the marriage. I've got to constantly be thinking about what she needs from me. How do I make her life the best thing? Because you know what? If I make her life the best it can be, she's going to make my life the best it can be. The third thing is it's challenging. It's a real challenge. You have to prepare to be stretched. On a continuing basis, you must be prepared to be stretched. And then fourthly, yes. And then fourthly, it requires great determination, focus, because you never arrive in a marriage. People get married and they think things will settle down. I don't have to do all these things. Once you're married, you must still court. We had Friday night was our date night, right up until the last year of our life. Friday night was our date night. That meant that we went out to a special restaurant, or we drove up to the mall in Troy, Michigan, or if there was a decent movie, we were very careful about what we would go and see. We'd go see a movie. We loved documentaries. So we did things together, and I didn't take weddings on Friday night. And if you got a wedding out of me on Friday, you'd have to get it done by 4:00 because I'm not going to give up my date night. And we locked it in. And then one of the things that we were able to do, and I teach this all the time, you must be willing to spend an hour a week on your marriage. Sit down with a pen and a piece of paper, each of you, turn your phones off, turn the computers off. Don't be at home where the kids are going to bother you. Be alone. Spend an hour talking about your marriage.
Mhm.
Where do you want your marriage to be in 2 years? Where do you want it to be in 5 years?
Yeah.
Where do you want it to be in 10 years?
Mhm.
Talk about those things, because what that does is that forces you deeper.
Yeah.
And now you got to put some things down.
Mhm.
What do we want to achieve together? A vision, if you will, for the marriage. The vast majority of people I counsel with had no vision for their marriage.
Yeah. They just
They
want to
could not tell me where it was going in 2 years or
Right.
5 years. And yet that is the most important thing in your relationship, your marriage.
Yeah.
As that marriage goes, so goes the family. As the family goes, so goes the community. As the community goes, so goes the state. As the state goes, so goes the nation.
And it's so interesting because, I mean, just being honest, I wrote all my goals down and I didn't write down any marriage goals. I mean, I had my career goals, my
Sure
family
you did.
goals, and
Yes.
so I did. I was very careful about my goals, but I didn't, we do talk quite a bit. So, I mean, we've been married long enough to know we better or we're in trouble. But so let's, final question, and then I want everybody to know about your book. So
Okay.
my big thing is on purpose, and on purpose is simply disciplined, pre-thought, predetermined. And so marriage on purpose, basically what you've said is it's pre-decide those practices that are going to serve the other and you at the same time so that you have that 1 + 1 = 1, because it is the key relationship outside of God. So
Yes.
it's on purpose, right? I mean, it's
Yes,
not,
it is.
it's not just a win.
Yes, absolutely. So what I would say is, if you are going to purposefully go after God and purposefully establish a covenant marriage, you're going to find the rewards of that are so great that you'll never want to stop doing it. So here's what I say. It takes 4 things: 2 givers, 2 forgivers.
Ah,
You've got to be willing to forgive.
yeah.
You've got to be willing to give. You would be shocked if I told you how many times people sit in my office and something comes up after a series of counseling sessions that's been buried for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and never dealt with.
Yeah.
And the feelings are still there.
Yeah.
The man said something, or the woman said something, the man did something, the woman did something, and they've never gotten over it. You got to learn to give, and you've got to learn to forgive. There's no such thing as a 50-50 marriage. And I mean, that's a joke. Sometimes you'll give 100%, you'll get nothing.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll give nothing, you'll get 100%. But you shouldn't be focused on the percentages. Who's giving the most here? Who's doing the most here? What you should be focused on is you. Get your eyes off your spouse. Ask yourself this question: would you like to be married to you?
Yeah. Great question.
Just stop and think about it.
Yeah.
And boy, that's a sobering question.
Yeah.
When you have to stop and think about that. What is it about me that makes me attractive to my spouse? Why should my spouse love me? Why should my spouse lay themselves out for me?
Yeah.
Ask yourself those very serious questions.
Those are great questions. Those are great questions. Well,
And by the way, I cover all of these things that we've been talking about in the book. And at the end of each chapter, we did something very unique. I wanted it not only to be a great reading book, but I wanted it to be a teaching book, and she did as well. So what we did is we produced this interactive study guide, 12 chapters, just like the book.
Yeah.
And so you can go through a chapter in the book, go through a chapter in the manual. And what I wanted to do was, at the end of each chapter, sum up the chapter, and we came up with the idea of oneisms. And so we list 5, 6, 7, 8 oneisms out of every chapter. So as you go through the book, you can pick up things, principles, ideas, thoughts that you can take over into your marriage. I don't believe anyone can go through the book and the work manual and not have a much, much better marriage. Our website is tonyscott.tv. It's very simple. It's just tonyscott.tv. It is also available on Amazon. You go to Amazon and purchase the book or the manual or our website.
And no better time or no better gift for Valentine's than a book that would bring you closer together And it just enriches the whole marriage at Valentine's Day, when that's the perfect thing. So
Well, I put a little warning on the backside of the book, and I did it for this purpose. It says, warning, many couples will experience an increase in passionate, intimate sexual love as they read the truths in this book. I
that's
wanted people to know that, because once you start coming closer together, the intimacy, the sexual pleasure of the marriage increases greatly.
yes, it's a result of the intimacy of the soul that
Yes,
results in the intimacy of the physical intimacy, which is so powerful. And it's, if we would just be so intentional about it. And I think your book is an answer to how to do that. And so if anybody
yes,
has any questions on, gosh, I want to do that, get the book, because you've got the how-to in there, and doing it together is a great, not just Valentine's gift, but lifelong love gift for
yes.
or people that are getting married, or people that
Yeah.
are struggling. It's
Yeah,
just
Shirley was a great spouse. She was a great wife. She was a great Christian.
Mhm.
Everybody who knew Shirley loved Shirley. I didn't know of Shirley ever having any enemies. I just kind of came along with the package. She was greatly loved. I'd have to straighten people out. She just loved people, and she had a way of doing that. But we would teach classes together. And even in our private counseling sessions with couples, she would say to them, keep the bedroom hot.
Yeah.
She would tell them, she'd look them in the face. And I don't know if some of them were just not used to hearing a pastor's wife talk like that, but she and I were able to master some of the greatest issues of marriage. And we did it in a loving, kind way. We sought after God. We went through our challenges. We went through our struggles in the first 10 years of our marriage, but we got married to love each other, and love each other we would.
Great. What a great way to end that. So I just appreciate what you do so much. I appreciate you coming on and sharing with us. And I know this is going to be a blessing to so many, because we all want happy marriages, but
Yes, we do.
we have to do what we've got to do to process through that. And thank you
Yes.
for putting together a process that brings that to fruition. So,
Well, thank you for your kindness and generosity and letting me share the program with you today.
well, thank you so much. It's tonyscott.tv. So everybody
Yes.
can get the book there, and we'll make sure that's in our comments. And thank you again for all you've done. And hopefully we'll get to do this again one day.
Absolutely. I'd be delighted to do that. God bless.
You too. Have a great weekend.
As you as well.
Bye-bye.